Hi, everyone, and welcome to Believe in Big Ten from State of Penn State Football Show. I'm Tom Hannafin. I am joined by the NFL and Big Ten Network's Rhett Lewis, who is a proud graduate of Indiana University, played wide receiver once upon a time for the Indiana Hoosiers, and you can only imagine what we're going to dive into in this episode of Believe in Big Ten. Brett, how are you feeling? You okay?
I'm smiling, baby. I'm smiling. Like, we're going to the playoff. Like, what's there to be upset about right now? You know, like, I'm just such a big fan right now of Auburn. Such a big fan right now of Oklahoma. Like, you know, you get Ole Miss, Bama, and A&M all going down for a third loss. Like, sayonara, SEC. Hello, Big Ten. Hello, Indiana.
It's still the Sig 10. It's still the Sig 10.
It's still the Sig 10, baby.
Oh, man. Believe in Big Ten is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen with the largest selection of odds on everything: football, the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, the UFC, and other MMA events. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Believe in Big Ten is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. And we are going to start with our big game of the week. Of course, the mega matchup, Indiana at Ohio State, a Big Ten title eliminator game. Potentially so many little things have to fall into
there's
place.
Some nuances.
And as part of this, I have a special guest, Rhett, from within the Believe Podcast Network. He is a former Ohio State offensive lineman, NFL offensive lineman. Please welcome into the show, Bryant Browning. Bryant, how are you today?
How about those Buckeyes? I'm doing good. It's a good week. It's a great week, man. Buckeyes. How about Rhett? How about those Buckeyes, man?
Hey, you know what?
Horseshoe experience, right?
I tell you what, absolutely deserved to win the game. But I will say that, you know, the Hoosiers belonged on this field, I would say, especially defensively. You know, I think they held Ohio State to what their second lowest total yardage output of the season. Although it did feel like, you know, really after the first quarter that Ohio State kind of put the pedal to the metal, foot on the throat. And look, you can't win the game making two massive mistakes on punt. And I think it ultimately, Bryant, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. To me, it came down to the punt. Indiana's punt team essentially gave Ohio State 14 points. And then the pressure packages on defense just totally overwhelmed Indiana's offensive line in this game. And that, to me, was really the difference. How did you see it?
I think you're spot on, right? I mean, obviously, it's a 7-7 game. It's a you're punting, drop a ball.
Going into the half.
Going into the half. Right. We scored touchdowns. And obviously, the punt return, I mean, they happened. It was a fantastic play by Caleb Downs.
Yes.
And the effort by the unit. So it takes that what happens, right? But I guess early on in the game, you know, that first drive, you know, you guys start off the game 4-4 on third down, right? And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, it's going to be a long day. Right? These guys,
here we go.
They can play. They're ready for our pressure packages. You know, it's going to be a game. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the protection just kind of start lacking, right? I mean, guys start missing. Guys start getting confused on who they had. And I feel like we did a great job at hitting things with speed.
Yes.
And it looked like our defense knew exactly what they wanted to do, and due to that speed and pressure and that things start to kind of get home, and then from there we kind of was able to get a good control of the game. So, yeah, it happens. Hey, that's silver bullet defense.
That is. It is.
I want to come back to a comment Rhett had moments ago, and for those of us watching on YouTube, we all saw Bryant's expression. So, Bryant, what do you think? Did Indiana belong on the same field as Ohio State?
I say they do. They're definitely a playoff team. Obviously, like Rhett said, the SEC kind of really helped out things.
We don't want themselves in the foot.
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah, right. And but even before that, obviously, without that happening, I do still feel Indiana was a playoff team. I mean, just look at the numbers. I mean, you know, we talked about it on our show. We kind of started looking at things before the game kicked off and how they ranked against the run. Obviously, we know how many points that they were scoring, but I didn't know, I guess, until I really started studying how good the defense was for Indiana. And once I started looking at the numbers, I looked at my co-host, Chimney Chekwa, who's an All-American cornerback. I say, like, how do we beat these guys, right? like these guys got the numbers across the board, and you watch it, and like, you know, it's for real. So Indiana's definitely a good team. I think some of the things that led up to the game kind of added some motivation there. And also Ohio State with, the pressure that they get from Buckeye Nation was really edged up, ready to play for this game. And it showed.
Yeah. Shout out to my guy, Justin Fry, former Indiana teammate and offensive line coach now at Ohio State, who delivered quite a message at the Skull Session, Bryant, which I'm sure you saw, making light of the, let's call it, outwardly brash comments from Kurt Signetti early before, this season even began. You remember Purdue sucks, so does Michigan, Ohio State, all that. And then the video board showed it. We win, we won, Google it. Look, take your shots. That's fine. You earned the opportunity to talk your talk, right? And I get it. You walk the walk in this game, deserve to win it. And at no point in the final 45 minutes did Indiana deserve to win the game. And so that's how you lose to the number 2 ranked team in the country, right?
Yeah.
Brian, you can't make those kind of mistakes. But when you look at the job that Jim Knowles did, in kind of game planning this thing, strategizing, coming up with those pressure packages, and then just kind of not letting Curtis Rourke breathe or have a moment but beyond the first drive, right? First drive felt like Indiana was attacking and Ohio State was kind of feeling it out. Well, they ended up feeling it out, quite nicely beyond that drive. So what was most impressive to you in the way that Jim Knowles kind of engineered this effort to keep this high-powered Indiana defense down or offense down?
Well, I think it really just two things. I mean, our defense is led by linebacker Cody Simon, and he's been in our program, obviously, this is his last year, his senior year, and he's been never really quite the starter, right? He's kind of always been playing behind guys, but he's been getting a lot of reps there. But once he kind of got going, he hit on the blitz package, right? Then he hit 2, right? Then now he has a couple sacks, and I think from there, that kind of livened up our defense, and everybody from there could kind of go on and start to shine. And like I said, I mean, it takes that sometimes, right? Sometimes it takes an individual effort from a guy, right, kind of going out there and igniting the team. So I think Jim Knowles overall did a great job at kind of just moving things around. Like until the ball was snapped, I didn't know where the pressure was coming from. Like if you just watching, watching it on TV, they kind of mix things up and things of that nature. And I think that helped. We did some overload stuff. I think that helped, right? Because even if you are protecting, we send so many guys to one side of the ball, eventually it's going to get home. And to be frank, I think watching the team up north play you guys 2 weeks prior, right? And the job they did against you guys, the Hoosiers there, kind of helped out, right? Playing a little bit tighter coverage with your DBs, kind of challenging those great wide receivers that you have. And then kind of leave it up to say, like, you got to beat us. You got to beat us fast because we're going to do something to try to disrupt Chris and his rhythm and things. And obviously, first drive, it didn't hit, right? It didn't work. You guys scored touchdowns. Yeah. And then from there, they start to hit. We start to affect things. And then obviously things kind of go in our favor from there. So I think it's I think it was a great game plan, team effort, obviously, when it comes to the defense. But I think that igniter kind of kicked things off for them, and the team was able to follow from behind from there.
Brian, you mentioned the pressure that Ohio State was able to put on Indiana quarterback Curtis Rourke. And Rhett, I want to ask you this question as an IU guy. Is that hand didn't seem great, obviously exacerbated. He took a ton of hits in this game. Any concerns for Rourke as this season wears on?
I don't think so, because I did talk to him leading up to the game, and he said he really felt like the thumb was back to 100% going into the game. Now, look, it's a different story coming out of the game when you take those kind of sacks and hits, and I certainly understand that. But I that's a tough dude, and understanding that he's coming down to the final 3-4 games of his collegiate career here, depending on what happens in the college football playoff, that he's going to find a way to make sure he's in tip-top shape going up against Purdue to try to win the Old Oaken Bucket this week, and then, wherever the CFP takes Indiana. So, the other question I'd have to ask you, Bryant, is, talking about Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, he's had to really maneuver some guys around up there at the positions that you used to man up there on the offensive line for Ohio State. How do you think they fared in kind of dealing with Indiana's kind of havoc creating front and doing it, without their starting center McLaughlin, and how that all kind of factored in?
I think they played great. I mean, obviously, this week, it's kind of starts to get leaked around. I guess Seth got hurt on Tuesday. So maybe on Wednesday, kind of Buckeye Nation, like, something happened at practice. Like, guys is kind of letting things out a little bit. And then you find out that it's Seth, and the role that he played in really transforming our offensive line. I mean, if you watched our offensive line last season, we had some talented guys, but it felt like often they was going in the wrong direction. Like almost they did not know, who they were supposed to take. Starting with the Indiana game.
Yeah.
Right? We can't identify linebackers. We're getting tackles for loss all across the field, especially in critical situations. So Seth kind of, really, I don't know, glued that ship together and having our offensive line kind of look like they know what they're doing. Obviously, sometimes you're going to get beat, right? But at least we know who we was trying to get to. You could obviously tell who was working to as a unit. So when he went down, I wasn't that concerned because we had Carson Henson, who played center for us last year. So I was like, Buckeye Nation, in my head, I'm not much on social media, but in my head, we should be okay. We got a guy there that knows the role. The guy who would step in at guard in this position is Austin Sherfield. He started 2 games this season when Donovan Jackson was injured. So we have some experience there. Now we can't have any more injuries. One more injury. Now we get to somebody that has to play that does not really have that experience. But I just figured we'll rally around it, and obviously we did. We did. We came together. Austin stepped in well. Hensman played well at the center position, as you would thought he should, with his experience there. And I think overall, you guys are a tough unit to block, right? You guys run a lot of games, a lot of twists. You guys are never staying straight ahead. Obviously, you guys won some battles up front. I think we did a good job. I won't butcher his name. Is it Kamara, the guy off the edge?
Mikhail Kamara. Yeah,
we did a good job against him. But Wes made some plays, right? Who's also a really good player who we will be watching playing on Sundays sometime here. So he made some plays, but that's to be expected. You guys are a good unit up front. You do a lot of things to keep you off balance. But I think overall we fought well. We got locked onto some things, and overall I said we won the battle.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't an easy task. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Bryant, before we let you go, and check out Believe in Buckeyes wherever you get your podcasts. It's an excellent podcast with Brian and Chimdi Chekwa. You have to check that out. This past weekend, we saw so many losses within the top 25, hell, in the top 10, top 15. They're certainly going to affect the college football playoff rankings and bracket, and all that stuff is still to come out. However, now everybody has this feeling is that anybody in the top 12 can beat anybody else in the top 12. There still appears to be this gap, and I would put Ohio State in that first tier of teams, now having seen how they played at Oregon, nearly winning that game against Penn State in Beaver Stadium, getting a narrow win there, then soundly beating Indiana. How many teams do you think are credibly able to win the national title this year?
That's a really good question. So if I was, picking teams, I got obviously Ohio State. I have Oregon, right?
Yep.
I throw in that mix. Whoever Georgia most likely comes out the SEC, right? And I like Texas. Really for the reason, not because obviously we know what they are capable at quarterback, but when I watch Texas, they could really run the ball, right? They actually could kind of get after guys and get things moving as against the line of scrimmage. Other guys I feel like has a little bit more work to do when it comes to this. You could point fingers at certain things. You look at Miami and their defense, right? You start talking about who else is in the mix here? We're looking at whoever comes out the Big 12, right? They're going to have a lot of
Penn State, Notre Dame, they're right up there.
Penn State, Notre Dame up there, but they have their issues as well when it comes to, Penn State offense in big games, Notre Dame and their overall, how they could just have a huge letdown that we all know.
Yeah. Can we just settle the debate, though, about the Big Ten and the SEC and how many teams need to get in for me? The Big Ten has not had one of their elite teams with a bad loss.
Yeah.
The SEC's elite teams, all of them have had weird, bad, or mediocre losses to teams in that conference. So I'm sitting here like, Oregon undefeated. Ohio State's only loss is to Oregon. Indiana only loss is to Ohio State. Penn State's only loss is to Ohio State. Like there's no like, ooh, kind of game there for these teams. So, I feel like anybody from the Big Ten that gets into the CFP, based off what we've seen thus far, has an opportunity to beat anybody else that's put in front of them. Now, how far you go, you need a little good fortune too.
Right. And on all that matters. And it'll be, leading into the season, I wasn't that excited for a 12-team playoffs. Now that we're here, I'm getting more excited about it. I do think they need to make some tweaks. Just too many games, I feel like, in college. But the 12-team playoffs I'm excited for because, like you say, we're going to, like, everybody who had a bad loss, everybody who had a good loss, they all kind of still in the mix, and they get that opportunity to really play it out on the field.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of good teams in the Big Ten, though. I mean, obviously, Penn State could beat anybody. Indiana could beat anybody except for Ohio State.
Hey. That's right. That's right. Right now, you're right.
Right. So, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And obviously, we know we probably have Oregon. Hopefully, we have Oregon here in a couple of weeks, and we can kind of hopefully play a little bit better in that game against those guys. So,
yeah,
it'll be fun regardless. I'm just really looking forward to it and seeing how everything plays out, and hopefully people, there's no crazy factor, a weird injury comes in or something like that of nature that kind of really hinders one of the games. You get to see teams go out there at their best, right? Supposedly best, and really battle it out.
I mean, imagine a crazy situation where an unranked Michigan beats number 2 Ohio State this coming weekend. Ooh.
Yeah.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us and taking a lot of time out of your busy schedule, especially to speak to Rhett. Again, check out Brian Browning and Chimney Chekwa on Believe in Buckeyes. Brian, just hats off to the Buckeyes.
Yeah, man. I'm a little sweaty right now. I just finished some cardio. Like you said, we got the team up north this week.
Hey, you got to get it in.
Us alumni got to be ready. The players and coaches might not handle it on the field.
We need everybody
to take care of it on in the stand. So I'm getting ready.
Brian, we appreciate you. All right, we roll on here on Believe in Big Ten. We're going to get to our biggest quarterback performance, our biggest playmaker, and our biggest defensive performance. Rhett, let's dive into quarterback here if we can. Who was your quarterback performance of the weekend?
Okay, yeah. So for this one, there was a couple of opportunities, a couple of different places you could go. I legitimately thought about Will Howard in this game, but there were some turnovers, from Ohio State that Indiana generated that, made me think otherwise here in this game. And, I just think that based off what was at stake, talking about the longest bowl drought in major college football, second game under a new offensive coordinator, that Nebraska quarterback Dylan Raiola, in getting it done in dominant fashion over the Wisconsin Badgers, 44-25, getting their 6th win, punching their ticket to the postseason. Dylan Raiola, 28-38, nearly 300 yards, his best performance since the Colorado game, right back in week 2. So he gets it for me. I thought he was really good in this game. And, I think a lot of times when you do have an offensive coordinator switch, I've seen this a number of times in covering Indiana, is that you don't often get that bump in week 1. Because you're scrambling, right? Everybody's swimming, trying to understand, language and who fits best where and what the best calls are. And then it settles down a little bit going into that second game. And I think that's where you saw the Dana Holgorsen effect for Dylan Raiola. 5 different players caught multiple passes. 7 different receivers were targeted at least twice. Ja'Cory Barney, Jamal Banks, Emmett Johnson made a huge impact. Single game career highs for Barney. He should have 9 catches every week from Dylan Raiola. That's how explosive he is. And I think that he fed his stars. He found the open guy. They got some the benefit of some run game in this one for Nebraska. But I thought Dylan Raiola poised, bouncing back from, a tough couple of weeks physically and mentally for him, deserving of that honor here from us here on Believe in Big Ten.
I had the exact same pick, so we'll zip through that. I also honorable mention to Will Howard, honorable mention to Jack Stratton, who went 10-14 for 76 yards.
I was at that game, brother. Yeah.
Yes, you were. A walk-on quarterback, steering that team in the right direction. And also hats off to Michigan quarterback Davis Warren. 26 of 35, 195 yards passing.
Throw it too much.
Yeah, I don't know why they're throwing it as much as they are. I don't expect
times.
That. I know it's not in their DNA to do that. All right. Biggest playmaker of the weekend. I'm going to go with Illinois wide receiver Pat Bryant. 7 catches, 197 yards receiving, and the game-winning 40-yard touchdown catch on the last play of the game to win in the birthplace of football at Rutgers in Piscataway. That was a thrilling end.
Hold on. Let's just pause for a second on the awards and dig into that game for a minute, because I was listening to this on the radio as I was frantically driving back from College Park, Maryland to Reagan Airport there in DC to try to catch a flight back to LA. And so I'm like, oh, Rutgers just scored. You got Chris Carlin's going nuts on the Rutgers radio network, and they've got like a minute left or something. And it was, you go up by a point, you're feeling really good. And it was kind of a back and forth affair, and Rutgers is playing well. And it was like an emotional score, and they go down, they get it done, and they take the lead. And now they've got to play defense, and they do. And they essentially hold Illinois to, what was it, a 58-yard field goal attempt at the end. But they're attempting it for the win or to lose if it doesn't go in.
Yeah.
And Greg Schiano calls the timeout, the sneak attack timeout. And the ball is woefully short and off target, and it's an obvious miss, but they get another opportunity. And instead of kicking it again, Brett Bielema says, no. I saw what this was going to look like. Take the field goal team off, put the offense back on the field, and then you allow the Pat Bryant touchdown connection from 40 yards out, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is just a heartbreaker for Rutgers. But I don't love the timeout call on a field goal that long, Tom. If it's a 30-yarder, a gimme, yeah, you want to make him think about it again. But goodness, I mean, the chances you make a 58-yarder in college football are like, what do you think? 10%?
If that.
So why are we leaving? Why are we doing that? The game's over.
I think it's just habit.
Maybe. I mean, like, you're trying to pull out all the stops. Like, I understand that part if you're Greg Schiano, but hindsight's 2020. Easy for us to say, right?
Yeah. Who was your playmaker of the weekend?
Yeah, my playmaker of the weekend was from the game. And look, I think I would have probably chosen Pat if you didn't, but I'll go to Caleb Johnson, who had a career high in rushing attempts in 35. He went for 164 yards. Actually, the bulk of those yards came in the first half. And look, if not for what Ashton Genty is doing at Boise State, we're talking about Caleb Johnson as the Doak Walker Award winner. He's had a rushing touchdown in all 11 games this season. The rushing touchdown in the matchup this week for Iowa, which was a big one, and they got the win over Maryland 29-13, broke the Iowa single season rushing touchdown record, which had been held by Sean Green. And so Caleb Johnson now stands alone, 21 rushing touchdowns. So 109 of his rushing yards, as I mentioned, came on 22 first half carries. He went 22 for $109 in the first half. And they were dominant on the ground. And now credit to Maryland, because they had a couple of timely stops, held them to a field goal, turned them over on their first couple of possessions and stayed in the game and actually made a comeback at the end. But then you had Caleb's understudy, Kamari Moulton, who had a long touchdown run to kind of seal the deal in this thing. And he went for over 100 yards in this game too. So they had 200-yard rushers, but Iowa and Caleb Johnson is my playmaker of the week.
My condolences to my Maryland friends, Mojo Matati and AJ Francis. Penn State's going to be hosting Maryland in the, quote, rivalry game.
The old rivalry game.
Yeah, that old chestnut. I'm going to go first on biggest defensive performance because I think you probably will agree with me. It's got to be Ohio State. They held Curtis Rourke to 8 of 18 for 68 yards passing. They allowed 2.1 yards per carry for Indiana. 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, a fumble recovery. If you want to tack on special teams, you can. There was the muff punt. There was the downs kickoff return for a touchdown. The biggest stat of all, Indiana had 151 yards of total offense, 145 of which they accomplished on their 2 scoring drives, one in the first quarter, first drive of the game, and the other one in the fourth quarter. So between those 2 drives, Ohio State allowed 6 yards of offense for Indiana. It doesn't get much better than that.
No doubt. And deservedly so. I think that was a dominant performance from that unit beyond that first scoring drive for Indiana. And so credit goes to the Buckeyes for sure on that front. I'm going to give my biggest defensive performance, though, to Michigan. And it feels like they're really finding their best formula for winning, even though we're saying they probably did throw it a little bit more than we expected in the 35 attempts for Davis Warren. But just to talk about the defense here, 6 sacks, 8 TFLs, 2 takeaways, allowed Northwestern just 117 total yards. And the Wolverines have now won 24 straight home games against unranked teams. 50-6 was the final there. Michigan over Northwestern outscored Northwestern 33-0 in the second half. That is why they won. The big reason why they won the national title a year ago. That kind of defensive effort, especially in the second half, you shut the door that way. That was absolutely massive. Probably their best overall performance of 2024. They are now bowl eligible, which is strange that we're talking about Michigan needing a win in week 11 or week 13 in the 11th game to get bowl eligible, but that's where they are. And they've done it this year a lot on the backs of their defense. And so I definitely give them the hat tip for that one today. They get my nod as the biggest defensive performance of the week.
Those are our biggest performers of this past weekend of Big Ten football. I do want to touch on Penn State versus Minnesota here selfishly in just a moment. But while you were on the subject of Michigan, we were just talking about with Bryant Browning. Do you think there's a possibility Michigan upsets Ohio State this weekend?
I don't. I think the way that Ohio State is playing right now, coming off that Penn State game, and they've essentially been playing do or die games in terms of what the stakes are and what the expectations are in Ohio State, really since the Oregon game. And, you know, they knew what was at stake this week against Indiana. They wanted to go out and dominate. They did. And I think they will carry that same just absolute blood boiling mindset into this matchup with Michigan. They get them at home, right? It's in Columbus this year. So I do think that Ohio State finds a way to come out and still gets it done against Michigan. They have too many pathways to victory. And for Michigan, I think the margin of error is still very small.
Will Howard's gotten better in every game as this season has gone on. They still need to figure out the running game, and some of that is the injuries to the offense.
By the way, your thought quickly on the quote-unquote exclamation point that Ryan Day put on the game at the end as he described the decision to get Will Howard into the end zone after Travion had slid down at the end to not go into the end zone.
Yeah, I thought what Travion did was right, and then it just felt like it was a little exclamation point, little knife between the ribs, twisted a little bit. Listen, I think bulletin board material is great, and obviously Kurt Cignetti provides a lot of that, and that felt like the team that has defined the Big Ten for decades now, kind of making a statement, being like, "You're a bridesmaid, you're not a bride." That sort of thing.
That's right. Okay, let's get to that Minnesota Penn State game, and I'll tee you up on this one first here, Tom, because you saw that one a bit more than I did play to play. I went back and watched as much as I could of it, and look, I thought Penn State's defense played pretty well in this game. They limited Darius Taylor to just 58 yards on the ground, kept Max Brosmer under 200 yards passing, generated the 2 turnovers, and ultimately did what they had to do. And then Penn State, that drive at the end was special.
So the reaction episode that my co-host and I, Justin King, did on State of State, a Penn State football show, check it out wherever you get your podcast. I evaluate this Penn State football team based on the way much of the fan base does. Is the goal is to win the national championship, right? Yes, good enough to win. This was the worst performance Penn State has put on the field this season. Defensively, they got it together in the second half. Yeah. The statistics that you just mentioned, while they seem impressive, if you watch the game from kickoff to the final whistle, those stats, like every Penn State sports media outlet was like, how is it only 175 yards passing? How is it only 58 yards rushing for Darius Taylor? It was these timely bursts that Minnesota got, and they played outstanding defensively. I'll give credit. Yes, that last drive of the game by Penn State to ice it and maintain the 26-25 lead, that was an outstanding drive. Drew Aller with some outstanding play throughout this game. Saw a lot of people online saying Drew Aller had a bad game. I was like, man, was 21 of 28.
He had a fine game.
He had a fine game. And obviously, the right tackle for Penn State, Anthony Donko, was injured in the first quarter. That certainly affected the way that Minnesota called the game defensively and the way Penn State was able to pass protect. So Drew Aller was running around a good amount, making things happen with his arm and with his legs. The fake punt that Luke Reynolds has his 32-yard carry on, big, gutsy call. I'm seeing a lot of people being like, man, the ball's on James Franklin, all this sort of stuff. I have watched this regime for 11 seasons woefully mismanage 4th and short instances between the 35-yard lines or critical one possession game defining opportunities. They have missed and whiffed on this a number of times. In the post-game press conference, James Franklin talked about how the play that they ran with Reynolds it's been called 6 times this year, but it's up to Dominic Ruley, who's a member of the punt team and basically the quarterback of the punt team. If he sees the alignment in the defense that provides the opportunity for that play, they'll run it. They hadn't seen that yet, and he checks out of it to a normal punt. But in this situation, they got the alignment they were looking for, and it was an easy play. So hats off to Penn State in the way they did that. So I can't necessarily sit here and worship at the feet of James Franklin for this decision, because I've seen him mess this up so many times. And here's my takeaway, because we got a lot of crap on our YouTube message board of, oh, you're being too harsh, you're being too negative on the team. You should not have put yourself in a position to need a 4th and 1 fake punt play from your own 35 up by 1 point on the road against inferior competition. And then this great last drive to ice. Oh, it's great. All this stuff is great. You had to be great, and you did, and you overcame adversity. That's outstanding. But did this team look like a team that can credibly win the national championship game? No. And that's the thing that I was stunned. Penn State fans, it was like, you know, that image where some people see a duck and some people see a rabbit? This was a polarizing game for some reason. Some people are like, oh, it's great, we won, we're still on the path to the playoff. Great. You could get smoked in round 1 in your own house. You good with that? You got to be trending in the right direction this time of year.
Yeah. But again, the resolve to win, I think, is still something that you can't overlook. And I do understand the pathway to achieve that resolve is not what you want. And until you get both of those things clicking, now maybe separately they've had moments where, they've had they've had the pathway, right? You look at the USC game, played really well and still found the resolve to win in that one, when they needed to. You can make the argument, play down to competition, a couple of times, play up the competition. I feel your frustration on that front, because it was not they have not really dominated in the way that you would expect from some of the talent that they have there in some of these games like this one. But Minnesota is no slouch now. Minnesota, they do a lot of fun stuff on offense. Their offensive coordinator, Greg Harbaugh Jr., is one of the better offensive coordinators in the country, and certainly in this conference. He doesn't get a lot of credit for it as of yet, but that unit is really tough to defend, and they've got more versatile players on defense that can deal with Tyler Warren than I think almost anybody in this conference has outside of Ohio State. And I think that was part of the equation here. I mean, Tyler Warren still had a nice game, but 8 for 102, as crazy as it sounds, is kind of pedestrian, right, for him. You know what I mean? But I think was still a big piece of this game. So overall, I feel your kind of sense of anxiety about where Penn State is right now after a win like this.
It's just asking the Penn State fan base, is good enough good enough? Because I'm the type of fan that I remember 2018 after losing to Ohio State at home, James Franklin saying, we've been a good football program. We want to be a great football program. We're not an elite football program. What you put on tape was not elite. You're not an elite team. I don't believe Penn State can credibly win the national championship. If everybody's going to feel all warm and fuzzy because we made the playoff because they bumped it from 4 to 12. Oh, we got to have it in our house. Isn't this great? Is that good enough? If you're good enough with that, that's cool. But I don't want to be the team still that is a bridesmaid, never a bride.
That's right. I'm with you on that. And by the way, you can't give up the 2 points on the PAT conversions.
No, not after Drew Aller gutted it out there in that last minute drive there in the second quarter.
Can't do that. That's 2 points. Those 2 points are valuable. I mean, it's a 3 is what it is. And it ended up giving Minnesota a 3-point lead at that time. So, something obviously to watch moving forward. But fun weekend in the Big Ten, as usual.
Fun weekend. More to come this weekend. Yes. Later on this week, we'll have an exclusive interview with Fox Sports' Joel Klatt joining us here on Believe in Big Ten. And we're going to get you set for the game, Ohio State versus Michigan. We have our apprehensions about how competitive it could be, but it's still the game. It's the rivalry in college sports. I'm Tom Hannafin. Check me out on State of State, the Penn State football show with former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King. He is Rhett Lewis. You can check him out on the Big Ten Network and the NFL Network. What game are you working this weekend?
This weekend we have UCLA Fresno State. We have the weird, because USC plays Notre Dame this week. There's no other conference opponent for UCLA because everybody else is locked in rivalry games. So they had to go out and get a non-con here to finish off the season. Unfortunately, one that will not end in bowl eligibility for UCLA after their loss to SC in the battle for LA.
The important thing for you is that it's a drive to work and not a flight. So congratulations on that. He's Rhett. I'm Tom. Join us later on this week on Believe in Big Ten.